2019 was one of the craziest years in video game history. We had many great games come out like Resident Evil 2 Remake and Devil May Cry 5. And whatever this abomination became. But amongst all these great games, one game stood out the most. That game is none other than Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Developed by Fromsoftware games, it is considered sort of the black sheep in all of the games they have released. And it's the 4th most sold game out of any Fromsoftware game. The reason why this game is different compared to the other Souls-like games was mainly because of the different direction it took when it came to its combat. Because most Souls-like games at the time were basically just dodge and attack and hope for the best. This game said F all that, we are changing everything we made so far, and cooked up the best third-person sword clash combat in any video game to this day, which earned it Game of the Year 2019. It is considered one of the most flawless games ever made out there.
Shut the f up!
Okay, enough glazing, let's get into the game. The opening cutscene lays out the game very well to us. We are in a land which is at war, a war that is about to end. Then we are shown two men clashing in what seems a very long fight, after which one man gets the upper hand on the other, putting an end to the war. Those men were Ishin, a swordmaster, and General. After that, we're shown a man scouting a battlefield, and then he finds a young boy stranded in the middle of the field. This is our protagonist, Wolf, and this is Owl, Wolf's foster father. And then Owl proceeds to tell this to his son.
As your father, my word is absolute. Your master's is a close second. As of today, he is your master.
This is the main plot of the game. We are tasked to protect our master at all costs, but our father's word comes first. This code plays a major role in the game. 20 years later, we find out that Wolf lost both his father and the boy he was tasked to protect. Damn, what a shame.
Yeah, well, the good news is you love Hank, so you're not all problematic.
The following cutscene shows a lady with an umbrella. Then she steps forward towards what seems as a very, very deep pit and throws a message down the pit.
For the sake of your master.
Then we see that our protagonist, Wolf, is at the bottom of this pit. This wakes us up, but we don't know why and how we ended up in this place. Opening this note, we find out that our master is still alive and that he's in a place called Moonview Tower. Now we get to control our character, but we are very low on health, without a weapon, and we have a mysterious white spot on our face that didn't exist before. The game then teaches us the basic mechanics of the game, like jumping, wall jumping, hugging walls, sneaking in the bushes, hanging from ledges, and other stuff.
I get it, but at the end of the day, we gotta be just a little bit more sensitive and remember that is not a. You just cannot rush up in that thing.
Then we make it to the tower, and there is a convenient hole in the wall, and here we meet Kuro, our master.
You did well to come here.
And he gives us our first weapon, which is the only real weapon in this game, and our main way of offense and defense in the game. And he gives us the healing gourd, which is the flask in this game from Dark Souls, which refills every time we rest at an idol or respawn. It's basically used to heal every time we take damage. Then Kuro asks if we were injured that night he found us. Wolf doesn't seem to remember the night that Kuro is talking about. And then Kuro tells us that we will discuss this topic later and that we need to escape Ashina Castle.
There's a secret passage beneath the moat bridge that will take us out of the castle. Lord Ishin told me about it once. I ask you to find that secret passage.
We open the door and leave and face our first couple of enemies. This area pretty much serves as a tutorial area where you fight some enemies, you deflect some attacks, teaches us the basic mechanics of the game and other stuff like sneaking up on enemies. And then we face our first mini-boss. He's a very forgettable boss. He's the very first boss in the game and he's such a pushover and he's very easy to deal with. I died to him. Okay, now I'm going to explain the main combat mechanic of this game and what makes it so different to Dark Souls or Bloodborne or other Souls-like titles. Your enemies have a posture bar that fills up as you either deal damage to your enemies or keep pressure on them. Once the boss stands still or stops attacking, this bar goes back to normal, and depending on how much health the enemy has, the bar goes down slower. Once this bar is full, the enemy's posture breaks and they are open for a death blow. A death blow takes away the entire health bar of the boss in one attack, and the boss then transitions into their second phase, which we can see on top of the health bar of the boss marked as these red dots. The same posture mechanic goes to Wolf, but instead Wolf can perfectly deflect attacks. This bar does get full, but it never breaks as long as we keep perfectly deflecting attacks and not blocking. This is a cool feature that lets the player know that they're at the game and that they aren't parrying the attacks and that they need to improve the timing of their attacks.
Si desea salir del modo ciego, haga clic en la...
Knowing this, I went back and beat the out of him, and it was very easy. After that boss, you make it across towards the secret exit. You use a reed whistle to call your master. Making it through the exit, we see a man standing in the middle of a field of white flowers.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
This man's name is Genichiro, and oh boy, this guy is the main reason I made this video. Genichiro knows about the divine heir and wants to keep him for himself, which sounds kind of weird to me, I'm not gonna lie.
Why'd you move to LA?
Oh, for the kids.
This is the first kind of real boss in the game, but it is very scripted. Regardless if you lose or beat this boss, you lose. Your arm gets cut off either way. Genichiro takes our gooning arm, leaving us dead in the middle of the field, and takes Kuro with him to do some stuff with. I don't know.
You ever seen the movie 48 Hours? Right now, he's having 48 hours with Diddy. It's definitely a 15-year-old's dream.
We then wake up in a room with a mysterious man next to us. He tells us that we are still alive after that fatal blow. At this point, we don't know how, but we'll soon find out. This man's name is the Sculptor, and he gave us his prosthetic arm so we can goon again, I guess. I don't know. The Sculptor tells us that our master is still alive and being held captive at Ashina Castle, and that they are going to make use of his bloodline. Very suspicious. But on a serious note, this prosthetic arm is very useful in this game. It can fit many prosthetic tools that I'm going to showcase later on in the video, and it also has a grappling hook. Then we're introduced to the main hub area of the game. Here we use the Sculptor's Idol. These are like the bonfires from Dark Souls. It regenerates our health and our healing items and respawns all the enemies we've killed except for like mini bosses and main bosses. And here we can find an undead warrior that we can practice against. We can deflect attacks, jump over attacks, dodge attacks, and other stuff like that. And this man has a curse. He's basically undying or infested. This is a plot point that is explained later on in the game. Using the grappling hook, we make it into Ashina outskirts and start our journey of finding the divine heir. We find our first prosthetic attachment, which are the shurikens. On our way, we fight another mini-boss. This is one of many generals in the game, and these guys are pretty cool because they serve as like small little tutorial bosses, but also reward you with really cool stuff, and they're very easy to deal with if you know what you're doing. He isn't really that aggressive. He does have a few cool moves. He introduces us to unblockable attacks, which are indicated by a red mark over our head. And these attacks are not like regular attacks where you just press the button and it blocks. These attacks, you have to keep an eye out against your enemy and see what they're doing. Even if you perfectly parry these attacks, you still take a ton of damage. He has two unblockable attacks. One is a sweep attack that you just jump over and do like a Mario head stomp to deal posture damage. And he has a grab that he does once he breaks your posture. They are very easy to avoid. He also has this one move where he stands still and he leaves himself open for attacks, but if we aren't quick enough to deal damage to him, he recovers a big chunk of his posture. But eventually, beating this boss gives you a prayer bead. Once we collect 4 of, we can upgrade our vitality, and he also gives us a gourd seed, which is like an upgrade item that I'll explain in a bit. Moving forward, we meet an old lady that confuses us with her son, then gives us a praying bell, which we don't know what to use it for yet. Going back to the hub area, we meet Emma. She's a doctor. She was the lady who dropped us the message at the start of the game, and I'm not gonna lie, she's kind of bad though. I would for sure have my way with her if I had the chance.
Get the fuck out of here, little nigga.
Anyway, She tells us that the dragon's heritage or dragon's blood resurrected us, and that once we die, we are resurrected over and over again. It is the power of the dragon's blood. And she also tells us that she created the healing gourd we have, and that we can improve it by giving her more seed, specifically gourd seeds, which the general dropped earlier. She asks us to show our face to her and tells us that the white spot we have on our face could be a symptom of the dragon's blood. Heading inside, we can pray by the golden statue using the bell, which sets us back 3 years earlier. Here we are at Hirata State, a place that is filled with a bunch of thieves and flaming buildings. Here we can find more prosthetic attachments like the flame barrel and the shinobi axe, and I defeated a bunch of enemies here, earning me enough skill points to get our first useful skill. But first we have to talk to the sculptor to get the skill tree. This is the first skill tree, the shinobi style skill tree, which lets us unlock my all-time favorite move in this game, the Mikiri counter. This move allows us to counter thrust attacks, which is vital for beating the game. Otherwise would end up similar to how I died at the start of the game.
Fucking the hell out of me, bro. I knew, bro.
Which is important to defeating the next boss, the Shinobi Hunter. This boss has some enemies around him that we need to clean up first to fight him, and he mainly relies on thrust attacks because he uses a spear. Using the Mikiri counter, he's very easy to defeat, but if you don't use it right, he turns you into a shish kebab, impaling you in the ground with his spear. Making your way across a bunch of enemies on a bridge, you meet your father in the middle of this burning yard. He seems to be wounded without any wounds. He gives us a key to the state mansion and then reminds us of the Iron Code. Then he dies, telling us to protect the master at all costs again. And then through some cliffs, we make our way to an area with this fat piece of surrounded by a bunch of thieves with shields and arrows. But this is the only boss fight in the entire game where you can ask for an alliance. You can see this guy over here, this old man. You can ask him to help you fight this boss, and he helps distract the other enemies so you can fight the boss one-on-one. He has a lot of weird patterns and weird combos, a lot of delays. He also stops in the middle of the fight to have a sip of his drink, which leaves him open for attacks. But when he drinks, he sometimes chooses to buff his sword, and now every time you block or deflect an attack or even get hit, you're gonna get applied with a bunch of poison. Or he sprays the drink in his mouth in front of you, causing a cloud of poison which you have to avoid. Other than that, he has a grab,
Whose pussy is this motherfucker?
a sweep attack that you can jump over, and when he breaks our posture, he uses his feet to kick the living shit out of us. At this point, I was warming up to the controls. I died a lot to this boss trying to beat him, and here I died truly for the first time, and this time you respawn again the similar way you respawned at the start of the game. But now, dragon rot has been spread throughout the world, and the very first few people who catch this sickness are the sculptor and the old lady who gave us the bell. And now the dialogue options with the sculptor are very limited. He only chooses to fit prosthetics or upgrade our items. That's all he does. Talking to Emma, she tells us that the dragon rot is caused by us resurrecting, which she asks for our help for some information so she can find the cure. The dragon rot is tied to a gameplay mechanic called the Unseen Aid. Unlike Bloodborne and Dark Souls, every time you die in this game, you lose 50% of your current XP and Sen. In those games, you lose all your points that you've collected so far, and then you have to go back to the place that you died and pick your loot back up. If you don't pick up your loot and die again, you lose all your points. But the Unseen Aid helps you not lose any resources, regardless if you've collected money or you've collected XP. It's tied to a percentage that the more you die and more dragon rot spreads in the game, the lower your Unseen Aid percentage becomes. It's a small gimmick, it's nothing major. You can ignore it throughout the game mostly, and you'll just be fine. And since we're back at the temple, I decided it was time to get those prosthetic attachments to use. After getting the upgrades, I went back and defeated the boss. Heading deeper in the mansion, we open the path using the key Owl gave us earlier. Heading downstairs, we find Kuro. He seems dizzy at first, but Wolf quickly realizes that he's stuck in some sort of illusion trick.
Illusion technique. I need butterfly.
This is Lady Butterfly, one of Owl's old companions who helped train Wolf back when he was young. She's the first real main boss I ran into. She's very different to every boss that we've fought so far because she uses long-ranged knives. She combines her kicks and blades to do some really nasty looking combos. She can also fly on some sort of white lines. When she's flying, she either throws some more knives at you or she does this grab move that is an unblockable, which if she lands, she gives us devious backshots.
I just love my dog.
She has another move that looks very tricky where she goes off screen and stomps on our head. But there is a very big but when it comes to fighting this boss. Remember the prosthetic shurikens we got earlier? This helps significantly when it comes to fighting Lady Butterfly. Every time she jumps in the air and is about to do one of her big moves, if you time it right and toss a shuriken at her, it can stun her and leave her open for many attacks. Finishing off her first health bar results in her disappearing. She's one of the rare bosses that has a second hidden phase that happens after you beat her first one. This phase is mostly the same moves. She does this one new combo that ends with the sweep, allowing us to stomp on her head. She also has these white floating things that follow up after she does one of her moves. Dodging these is much better than deflecting because they deal chip damage. And she also has the most annoying move in the entire game. This makes the fight 10 times more difficult if you don't deal with these illusions. Because if you don't deal with the ghosts, she just floats in the air and her posture recovers. Using the snap seed we got earlier, her summons disappear, letting us have the one-on-one again. Beating main bosses is slightly different from beating mini bosses. You have to death blow them twice to finish them off. And main bosses give you memories. Memories give us a bit of lore about the boss, but most importantly, once we use memories at the idol, we gain more attack power. After beating Lady Butterfly, we get this cutscene. Here, Wolf dies, but then Kuro comes back and realizes that we're truly trying to protect him. He gives us the dragon's blood, which allows us to resurrect and live again.
Loyal wolf, take my blood and live again.
This explains why we were at the bottom of the pit at the start of the game and makes us remember why we ended up here. And Genichiro wants this power for himself so that he can use the dragon's blood to defend the falling land of Ashina, which we see throughout one of these remnants in the game.
That's why you wish to use the power of my blood. It doesn't matter how much power you obtain. You'll keep on fighting until you're a monster, incapable of feeling pain or fear. I do not wish to corrupt the lives of men.
The next boss in our way is the ogre. This chained gigantic piece of shit is the first boss most players get stuck at. On my very first playthrough a couple years ago, it took me 4 hours to beat this guy. This boss is like a UFC fighter. He mainly relies on grabs, kicks, and punches. He has many grab variations that are kinda hard to react to, and fighting him on the stairs is like a death sentence because his moves extend further because he dives with his full body towards you. He also has a drop kick. But the main weakness this boss has is weakness to fire. Using some oil we found at Hirata State, we can oil him up and set him on fire for a stun and some overtime burn damage. This makes the boss slightly easier, but he still almost one-shots you early on in the game.
Tell all these motherfucking niggas that's around here whose pussy this motherfucker is.
But I managed to beat him fairly quick. Heading up to the blocked path, we find a monocular, which is really useless in this game. I don't know why this item exists. It just exists. I don't know. And the next area is another general with a bunch of enemies around him, which we have to clear before fighting him. He's exactly the same as the previous general, but he just has a lot of enemies around him. That's what makes him a little bit more difficult. If we take the right side after beating the general, we read a note that tells us to go back where we came from. But I'm not a pussy. I ignored the message and went forward.
You need to hang up that computer call. Come over here and kiss me on my hot mouth.
This is one of the many optional annoying bosses I talked about earlier. Headless. These bosses are annoying. Like, really annoying to fight. You can't deal damage to them unless you use a buff called Divine Confetti, and he slows you down when you get near him, and each hit he lands on you causes a terror bar to fill, which once full will instantly kill you. For now, I'm not ready for this boss, and I'm going to skip him, visiting him later on. So I went back to the next area after defeating the general, which are a bunch of cliffs we can grapple across, but there is a giant snake called the Giant Serpent in this area that is blocking our way. The way you deal with this giant drake snake is to sneak around it and make it across to a small tent where we hide inside and stab it in the eye when it gets close enough.
If I back it up, is it fat enough? When I throw it back, is it fast enough?
The next area we can eavesdrop on a man crying about his dead horse.
All it took was a bit of gunpowder. He startled, and now he's dead.
This lets us know that we should pick up the firecracker attachment, which we can purchase from this guy in a black tent who sells Robert's firecrackers, which are very strong against animal type enemies. Then we go down into a giant battlefield where we meet the next boss.
My name is Kuro Masataka Oniwa.
This next boss is a bandit that Ishin defeated back in the day, but he saw some potential in him because of how strong he was, and he gave him General Tomuro's spear and made him Ashina Castle's gate protector. This is supposed to be the first main boss of the game, but for me it was the second. He's relatively easy to beat because he just runs around on his horse and has very easy to telegraph attacks. Sometimes he runs away and ties his spear to a rope, but remember those firecrackers we picked up earlier? This destroys the boss. In his second phase, he's mostly the same, but his horse gains some jumping moves that are kinda hard to see because of the camera angle. But this first main boss of the game isn't really worth talking about much because he isn't the real first challenge in the game. We're gonna talk about him soon. Beating this boss, you gain another memory and the mechanical barrel, which allows us to upgrade our prosthetics even further. After beating him, if we go through this stairway, we meet a masked man who asks us what our name is.
Before I kill you, tell me your name. Tell me your name!
Then he calls us a one-armed wolf. He gives us a mission to kill some quote-unquote rats that are inside the castle, which I went and did, after which he gave me a skill tree called the Ashina style skill tree. Making it through the Ashina castle gate, we have to face another mini-boss. This thing is a very unpredictable, super annoying boss, because randomly, while it's running around, it decides to attack you and run away, and you can't hit it back. And if you notice these fire things next to its head, it deals chip damage even if you perfectly block it. But it's another dumb animal that is weak to firecrackers, and once you deal enough posture damage to it by hitting its head, it has a mental breakdown and crashes into a wall, letting us kill this piece of shit. We finally make it to Ashina Castle. On the left, you can eavesdrop on some guys yapping about armor and some other bullshit. Killing one of these guys gives us a key where we can find Gyobu's old broken spear. It's a very good useful tool that pulls enemies towards you, and it can strip your enemies from the armor they have on them. And I'm 100% sure 80 to 90% of the player base doesn't even know this tool can strip armor off your enemies. On the stairway past the castle entrance, we have another general with some enemies around him. Using the shurikens, I took out the jobbers and fought the general. Unlike the previous one, this general actually has one new move where he does a quick combo followed up with a thrust that you can counter. Then we follow some smoke trails on the rooftops where we meet a bunch of crazy enemies that try to jump us. and I dealt with them the same way you deal with any enemy in a Souls-like game. You ignore them and run past them as fast as you can. The next area has some enemies that use the Ashina style attacks like the Ichimonji, and another prosthetic which I didn't use at all in this game because it's f***ing useless. Heading further inside, we open a gate and we meet the Ashina Elite. This is one of the more unique bosses in the game where you don't have to hit him. I mean, you can hit him, but it's better if you just deflect his attacks, because he just himself with his own attacks. His main attack is like a flash that happens around the sheath of his blade, and once you see it, you can double tap your deflect button to destroy his posture. He's a very quick boss and a very easy boss because he has such a small posture bar. Beating him, there is a painting behind him which once you inspect teaches you how to deflect lightning. Now, I have a confession to make. In my first playthrough, I completely got lost in this area. I didn't know where to go because I did not see the window next to the Ashina Elite. I went back to Senpo Temple and got confused there, and I did not know what to do. I got very frustrated and quit the game. But a year later, I was watching my friend play the game on Discord, and he found Genichiro, which is the next boss, and I was shocked, like, what? You fight this boss this early in the game? This is the main complaint people have when it comes to this game, because it doesn't have a map.
Stop acting like you know the way ahead, like you know the rules. There are no rules, man. We're lost.
Now, we're going to talk about the main star of this game.
This will only take a moment. Let's see. For as long as you are alive, the dragon's blood can never be mine.
The best boss in gaming history, in my opinion. I know, I said it, I think this boss is the best boss in any video game. Because other than the gameplay, there is already pre-existing beef between these two guys. He violated us brutally at the start of the game, even though Wolf wasn't properly warmed up yet from his injuries. But he didn't just randomly do that. He has real motives. Back when Ishin was in his prime, he single-handedly managed to defend against a lot of people who tried to invade Ashina. And now that Ishin is sick and not as strong as he used to be,
Hey guys.
Genichiro, being the grandson of Ishin, has some pretty big shoes to fill, and he isn't pulling any strings when it comes to defending Ashina. Aside from the story, talking about the gameplay of this boss, the gameplay is great, because this boss serves as a reality check to everyone who hasn't been paying attention to the game's mechanics and accidentally reached him in the middle of the game, because he uses everything you've learned so far, but 10 times stronger. He has longer combos, he has unpredictable ranged attacks, and in the second phase, he has a mini game which after he jumps in the sky and strikes us down, he either does a thrust attack that we can Mikiri or a sweep attack. This catches a lot of people off guard because in the first phase, he only does a thrust attack after that jump attack, which makes you pay attention to the enemy's attacks and not just spam the deflect button. After beating his first two phases, he strips off his armor and now gains lightning powers which are taught to him by his old mentor. In his third phase, he only gains like 2 new moves, a long ranged thrust attack that he does at the start of the fight and a thrust attack after his long combo. But the real star of the show are the lightning attacks. He has 1 with his arrow and 2 with his sword. These lightning attacks can be dealt with by jumping in the air, catching the lightning with our blade and deflecting it back at our enemy, which does a ton of health and posture damage. And also the theme song for this fight is one of my favorites in the entire game. Defeating Genichiro, you get this cutscene. As I said earlier, Genichiro is willing to do whatever it takes to get what he wants, which is why he drank the rejuvenating waters so he can have a similar revive like Sekiro. And this lets us know that there is another way to resurrect, but this resurrection method has some nasty side effects to it.
For her sake, I will shed humanity itself.
Heading downstairs, we find Kuro, and he tells us that he no longer wants to be immortal or have any ties to the dragon's blood, and he wants to sever the ties of immortality.
The immortal oath, the rejuvenating waters, the dragon rot, they all corrupt men to the point that they no longer live as men.
And now we get to the middle part of the game. We have to get 3 items: the Immortal Blade, the Lotus of the Palace, and the Shelter Stone. Each one of these items is located in different spots in the game. Once we meet Lord Ishin and talk to him, who's very sick, we find out that he was the masked, mysterious guy who gave us the task earlier, and tells us that we should go look for the Immortal Blade at the Senpo Temple, where the monks are located.
Who knows what those degenerates are doing shut away up there in the mountains.
And as for the Lotus, it's located at the Sunken Valley, and the Shelter Stone in Ashina Depth. Here I gave the Sakura droplet to Kuro, which gives you another resurrection chance. Going back to the place where we got the key for Gyobu's spear, inside you can find the abandoned dungeon, where if you go deeper in the dungeon, you can find an elevator, which is the only elevator in the entire game, which I'm a very big fan of because I hate elevators. I'm looking at you, God of War 2018. Making your way up the elevator, you arrive to the Senpu Temple, which is the first location I went to get one of the 3 items, the Immortal Blade. The interesting thing to know about this place is that it's filled with a bunch of monks who have given up on their faith, and now they are addicted to sugars. Sugars are items you find throughout the game that give you some buffs, offensive, defensive, and some other buffs, but I did not use them. And also, these monks have been conducting some experiments on children trying to make another divine child, indicated by all of these statues you find in this location. Each one of these statues represents a child that has been experimented on, but the results weren't successful. I like how the brightest and most beautiful part of the game has the darkest lore in the entirety of the game. Next to these statues, there's a bridge that we're trying to cross. Blocking our way is an armored warrior. This guy is the only boss in the entire game that takes 0 damage from our attack. And even death blowing him once his posture is full doesn't put him down. The way you defeat him, you have to position him in a way where he's close to the edge of the bridge, and his death blow animation, Wolf kicks him off the bridge. Fun fact, Robert is the child of the armored warrior and was sacrificed during those water experiments I mentioned earlier. The monks promised they would cure his son's sickness in exchange of him to defend the temple. Crossing the bridge, we make it towards the temple and find a bell inside which we can ring, and it teleports us to a different realm. This is the realm of the screenfold monkeys. In this realm, we find the only monk that is still faithful to the Buddha. He tells us that each monkey has a unique way that we must deal with them to defeat them. Now, this boss is a very long chase sequence, and it's also a puzzle at the same time. And whoever made this boss, bro, I'm praying on your downfall. Because when it comes to this boss, sometimes I beat it very quickly, but other times I'm just stuck chasing a bunch of stupid monkeys, not knowing what to do with them. But to simply explain this boss, you have to beat 4 monkeys that all have some sort of trick to beating them. The first monkey is the seeing monkey, or the vision monkey, which to defeat him, we have to open up a door that brings some sort of darkness into the room, and we have to lure the monkey inside of the room, so we obscure his vision and go behind him and kill him. The next one is the hearing monkey. For this one, he goes on top of this railing over here, and there is a giant bell beneath him. Once we ring the bell, the monkey becomes deaf and gets stunned, making it easy to kill it. As for the last one, I don't specifically know what I should do with it or what way I should defeat it. I just used an invisibility sugar and chased it around until I managed to kill it. But there is still a 4th one. What about it? Well, if you pay attention to the audio behind you, you can hear some weird breathing and footsteps behind you, as like someone is creeping up behind you. This last monkey is the invisible monkey, and it's been chasing you around the entire fight. This one is very easy to kill. You just have to go back and hit it a few times and it dies. Something I forgot to mention is that every time you kill a monkey, some terror monkeys summon, which are just small monkeys you can easily avoid by just grappling all over the rooftops and trees. Beating the monkeys, we meet another divine child.
Blade that cannot be drawn?
Yes.
It is so called, for not one who has drawn it has ever survived.
Who tells us that the monkeys were simply trying to protect it. She's one of the only surviving children of the weird water experiments we mentioned earlier. She reveals that she has the mortal blade, and then we get this cutscene.
If you are prepared, you may gaze upon the blade. How are you? Your eye. I see. You carry the curse of the dragon's heritage.
The Immortal Blade is basically another weapon you can use, kind of. It's only like a little weapon art that is equipped in your menus. It does a lot of damage to undying enemies or infested enemies. And with that, we're done with Senpu Temple. The next stop I went to is Ashina Depth. To go there, we have to go back to Ashina Castle to a location called Ashina Reservoir. In here, you can find an optional mini-boss called 7 Ashina Spears in front of the Moon View Tower. This boss is like the Shinobi Hunter, but on steroids. It has a long wind-up attack where once he swings at you, he manages to push you back and then follows it up with a thrust attack. But where this guy is different from the Shinobi Hunter, if you manage to counter one of his thrusts, he doesn't just let you hit him back easily, he follows it up with another attack. But this attack results in him getting greedy and then he just falls to the ground. On the other side of this location, we can find the only black character in this entire game. He yaps about some stupid music playing, and there are some dialogue options to tell him where to go and where to not go. I told him to go somewhere else to save his life, because if you don't tell him where to go, he basically dies. Behind this guy, we can find a path that if we take down, we meet the very first ninja of this game. These guys are called Lone Shadows, and they aren't that bad to fight, but this tight space that we fight in isn't very helpful, because the camera just gets all up in your face and you can barely see what's going on. He mainly uses kicks for his combos, and he does some sweep attacks with his foot as well. He has a giant wind-up stomp as well, and some sword attacks. But the main thing this boss has is a long combo with his feet, where he finishes it off with a kick that you can Mikiri counter. Making it through, we are at the bottomless hole, and in this location we find this guy called the Shichimen Warrior. We aren't ready for this guy yet. He has a lot of terror attacks, and I'm not ready to fight him at this point. Going further into the bottomless pit location, we actually find the bottomless pit. Next to it, there is a lady that tells us to throw ourselves off the cliff. We proceed to jump, but at the very last moment, we manage to grapple to safety. And we finally make it to Ashina Depth. Here we find the only poison swamp in the entire game, classic Miyazaki style. But thank God it's the only poison spot in the entire game, and it's pretty small. Here we have some enemies that use guns and another mini-boss blocking our way called Snake Eyes. She uses a gun that has a blade at the end. She has one of the weirdest animations for an unblockable move I have seen in a game. And she likes to shoot us a lot. Eventually we beat her and move past the fog wall. Here we have a very suspiciously big arena that doesn't have a boss for some reason. I wonder why that's the case. Making it across this arena, we find a place filled with a bunch of fog. Inside this fog area are a bunch of ghost-like, fog-like enemies, and another fat but this time around him are some monkeys. After that, we manage to get on top of a house, which seems to have someone in there playing the flute. Inside, we find the reason why there is a bunch of fog in this place, the Mist Noble, and we drop down and easily kill him. This boss is considered a mini-boss, but he's like the easiest boss in the entire game. Killing him results in the fog to disappear, and now we can go to the deepest part of Ashina Depth. We see that the residents of this place aren't normal-looking people. They don't even look close to human. Inside a house nearby, we can see one of the residents who's still normal. For some reason, he's scared, hiding as a basket. He explains to us that all of the residents of this place drank the waters flowing in the fountain, which caused them to turn this way. But this guy managed to resist the urge to drink this water, and that's why he stayed normal. The next boss blocking our way is this ghost lady who seems to be playing some sort of instrument, and she's also crying for some reason, asking us some weird questions.
Actually, sir, can you tell me, where is Lord Sakusa?
I don't know.
She isn't hostile at first, but once we tell her we don't know what she's talking about, she goes full on crazy average female mood swing mode. This boss is somewhat boring, and I find it so weird that all of the bosses who have some weird ghost element or terror element to them are very boring to fight, because she just stands away invisible and she just swings her sword up and comes to you and does the same combo over and over again. If she manages to break your posture, she does this weird dance move that till this day I still don't know what it does. Oh, and also there is a mechanic I forgot to mention earlier. If you hold down your block button, you will recover posture much quicker than just standing still and waiting for it to recover. If we get her to her second phase, she gets a new version of the same combo she did, but with slight delays in between. But overall, it's a pretty boring and simple boss that is not strange to us at all. After her, we make it to the final boss of this area, the Corrupted Monk. Well, the fake version of the Corrupted Monk. This ghost-like boss has very high posture recovery, and to deal with that, you have to deal some damage to her health bar, so her posture doesn't recover very fast. When it comes to her attacks, she has really long combos like this one. And usually most of her combos end with a thrust or a sweep or this attack. She's mostly fun to fight, but it's only one very long phase and it gets kind of repetitive because she keeps recovering her posture and spamming the same attacks over and over again. Beating her gives you the Mibu breathing technique, and inside we can finally find the shelter stone, which means we're done with this area. And the last item we have to go get is the Lotus of the Palace, which is located in the Sunken Valley. To get to the Sunken Valley, we have to go back to the old grave and move to this part where we find some monkeys, and then we meet more of these sniper enemies and the second Snake Eyes. After that boss, we make it across a bridge where we get shot by these snipers multiple times, and then we get to a cave where we meet the long-armed centipede boss. This boss is like Wolverine. It has claws and it does really long combos that you have to spam deflect to break down its posture. And just like every single boss we've talked about so far, the boss stops attacking and decides that it's time to do a sweep attack, because you know, why not? Beating it and making it across to the door behind it, we can use the gunfort key we got inside of the library at Kuro's room, and while crossing this bridge, Drake comes back and swings his big snake to break the bridge and make us fall down. Inside the water, we sneak past the snake and make it to the Sunken Valley cliffs where we grapple onto some statues and make it over to another animal boss fight. This animal in question is no ordinary animal. It's the guardian ape, and it protects the Lotus of the Palace. Fighting it is very strange to what we've been fighting so far. It doesn't have a sword, and again, it uses its fist just like the ogre. But this time, this boss is very quick and has very weird patterns to get used to. And I gotta say, out of all 3 bosses that you have to fight to get these items, this is the most fun boss out of them. Also, at random points of the fight, it decides to fart poison gas and runs away, digging up its ass to grab its shit and throw it at us. And it also has this one bullshit attack that it uses once it goes below half HP. It jumps in the sky and tries to grab us. Just watch this footage clearly in slow motion and tell me that this move is not a bunch of bullshit.
I got like Dotson on the motherfucker.
I was clearly outside of the hitbox here. Defeating the boss, you get this cool execution animation, and the game makes you think that you've beaten the boss, but of course, no, there is another hidden second phase, where the ape grabs its cut off head and grabs the sword we used to cut off its head, and the second phase starts. This phase is much slower than the previous one, because it just keeps screaming over and over and over again, making you run away, because if you stay inside of the circle, you're going to take damage and a terror bar fills up. It has some slow combos as well, and this very intense combo that the finisher gives a very big reward. You can also interrupt this screaming move with your immortal blade because it's very weak to it, considering it is an immortal being or an infested being. It also has another weakness. Once you deflect that big gigantic attack, It falls to the ground, and you can use the spear prosthetic to pull out the centipede and deal big posture damage. Eventually, you beat the boss and kill the centipede inside of it, and then we go inside and get the lotus flower. Also, remember that big arena we talked about in Ashina Depth? If you go back there after beating the ape, you get to fight it again for a second time, but in the second phase, it calls another female monkey to help it fight you, so it's another dual boss. But it is completely optional, and the order I decided to collect the items in makes this boss completely optional. After getting all 3 items, we noticed that we cannot teleport back to Kuro's room or any of the closed castle idols, but we can go back to the abandoned dungeon idol. And once going back to the castle, we noticed that most of the place has been ran through by ninjas, almost like it's being invaded by them. There are ramps everywhere, and we meet the first few interior ministry enemies. There's these cool Beyblade looking guys that have really fast attacks, but you deal with them no different than the other soldiers. They're just a bit more aggressive. Now there's another ogre fight at the upper tower antchamber. He's exactly the same as the last ogre, but with more damage, and the only reason he is a harder boss fight is because the area that you fight the boss in is a lot tighter than the other one, so his grabs have a higher chance of hitting you. At the Ashina dojo, we find another ninja at the place of the Ashina elite we fought earlier before fighting Genichiro, but next to him you notice there is another ninja, and if you go and kill the other ninja with a death blow, the ninja in the room notices that you killed his ally and turns back and the boss fight starts. But there's an exploit to this boss. If you stealth blow the ninja and go back and restart the game, you respawn back at the dojo, but this time around the regular ninja is dead and the boss is just standing still, not knowing that you're there, and you can just go behind him and easily take one of his health bars. This makes the fight much quicker. Going back up to the place where we fought Genichiro, we find none other than Owl, our father, who's apparently still alive because he faked his death back at Hirata State. Turns out he even thought you were dead, and that's not a real mystery to us, because if you look closely to the blade that struck us down back at the mansion, you notice that it looks exactly identical to the blade of Owl. And here we're presented with one of the big major choices of this game, which change the ending of the game depending on which choice you make, and significantly change the length of the game as well. So you either can forsake Kuro and stay loyal to the Iron Code and obey your father's word, or you can break the Iron Code and stay loyal to Kuro. Each one of these are different endings, but one leads to one ending and the other one leads to 3 optional endings. For a first comer, I recommend to break the Iron Code because you're going to be missing out on a lot of bosses that are actually really fun to fight. After you make that choice, this happens.
Why, boy? Why can't you understand your father's will?
A code must be determined by the individual. This is what I've decided.
Seems you've grown, if just a little.
This version of Owl is called Great Shinobi Owl, and he is one of the fastest and most tricky enemies to fight in the entire game because he is exactly the same way you are. He is a shinobi. He fights in dirty ways and uses tactics that are not orthodox. He just fights you and tries to get an advantage ahead of you. He uses many things like firecrackers, shurikens followed up by multiple attacks, and this ball of smoke that stops our healing items. And like I mentioned, he's a very fast boss. Every time he hits you, he doesn't let you hit him back to get posture damage off on him. He just jumps back and retreats to safety. But his first phase is not that annoying. His first phase is much easier than his second one and much less annoying than the second one. The transition to his second phase is a bit different. He almost like gives up in front of you, but as soon as you get close or try to hit him, he drops a smoke bomb and disappears. In his second phase, he uses that smoke a lot so we cannot see him, and he runs away. You have to try and lock onto his character to see which direction he's coming from. And the biggest change in this phase is instead of the shurikens, he uses poison so he can run away and recover his posture while we're trying to avoid the poison. And also, did I mention that he can Mikiri counter your charge attack?
Did you talk back to me?
No, I didn't. Yes, you did. Come here.
But after a long and annoying fight, we finally managed to defeat the boss.
You taught me well.
That's my boy.
Defeating him, you receive a tree branch that belonged to the Sakura tree, but it seems to not have any flowers on it. I'll explain in a bit why this item is important. Going downstairs, we meet Kuro, and now we combine all the items we collected so far, and the only item left is the dragon tears. But before getting the dragon tears, this branch that we got from Owl is one of the items needed so we can get one of the secret endings in the game. Now, I don't know how people figured this out. You have to eavesdrop on Kuro, talk to Emma a bunch of times, get some items, and eventually, if you talk to Emma enough, we find out that we do not have to necessarily kill Kuro to stop the dragon's blood. So Emma gives us a secret bell that we can use to travel back to Hirata State again. Traveling back to Hirata State, the reason being is that we have to go back and get a tree branch that had the flowers on it, because the one we got earlier did not have any flowers on it. And here we fight another Lone Shadow. The only difference with this Lone Shadow, he whistles and summons some wolves to help him in combat. The way you stop this attack is just by throwing a shuriken at him or attacking him. It's not that difficult. He's still another Lone Shadow duplicate if you take away the wolf moves. And making it past this guy, we find Queso talking to another ninja, saying that the plan Owl had was on point.
Taking the Hirata State was surprisingly easy. Owl's info was right on the money, you know.
What do you mean bro's built like a 1x1 Lego piece? What even is a 1x1 Lego piece? Yep, you're banned. Have a good night.
This further indicates that Owl was the one who killed us back at Hirata State. If you have not noticed yet, Owl is the true main villain of this game. So we kill these guys and make it into the mansion. Here we get to the second Owl fight.
That day, I pulled you from the battlefield, a starving cub. I have no idea what you become. Father, it breaks my heart. But I'm putting you down.
This version of Owl is much faster and more aggressive than the other one and has a lot of moves that don't look similar at all. And he chains a lot of moves together, so none of his combos almost look the same. And he has some attacks that he does different versions of depending on how far you are. And his sweeps are much different. He does a dash while doing them, so you have to predict the way he's gonna go if you want to stomp on him. And he has another thrust attack that is like a charge as well, similar to Genichiro. In his second phase, he summons an owl which he can teleport to after he finishes some of his attacks. This way he puts himself into a safer position so we can't punish him. And after flying around with his owl, he jumps out of the owl, tries to either grab us or does a heavy dive attack. He also uses the owl as a horizontal projectile we have to jump over, but after you jump over it, he does another thrust attack that you can Mikiri easily. Defeating him, we're rewarded with the branch with the flowers on it. And now the only thing left to get is the dragon tears, which are located at the Fountainhead Palace. Now to get to the Fountainhead Palace, we have to go back to the wedding shrine and go inside this tent and pray. And this creature with a massive schlong transports us to the next location.
Yo, it's Hump Day. Hey, what I need you to do is tag 3 big dick ass niggas under this tweet right here. I need some old niggas to do this bust that nut challenge with.
Here, while crossing the bridge, we fight the true corrupted monk.
What a
She's exactly the same boss as we fought earlier, but she has 3 phases. In her second phase, she summons some black ghosts that mimic her attacks, and then when they disappear, it's exactly the same fight again. Fun fact about her second phase, you can completely avoid it by just grappling on top of this branch and locking onto her and doing a jumping death blow, which leads to us skipping this phase entirely. In her third phase, the centipede inside of her breaks out of her body, and now she gains a new unblockable terror attack that comes out very quickly. You almost have to anticipate this attack, and there is no build up to it. You just hear the sound of the unblockable attack, and before you know it, you get hit with a terror attack. And she also gets a new combo that I've not seen before. It did catch me off guard in this fight. But aside from all the things that I mentioned, it's exactly the same fight. It is not an entertaining boss in my opinion because it's a reused asset from the previous one. It just has less posture. Beating her, we make it to the Fountainhead Palace. Here there are some dogs that shoot lightning from their mouth, and these annoying soul sucker enemies that suck your youth, making you old and slow. If you die during this debuff, you can't revive, and the only way to survive this is to go back and rest at an idol to go back to normal. And you have these female enemies that fight like they are dancing, and there is a spear version of these enemies that has lightning attacks as well. Here we can find another bull as well that you can startle with some firecrackers because it does not see you. Now startling it with the firecrackers attackers, it's supposed to run into the wall. In this playthrough, for some reason, my bull crashed into the wall, but got bugged out and started T-posing instead. And in this area, I died a couple of times and I got more dragon rot spread, so I decided that it was time to cure it. I went back and got a blood sample, gave it to Emma, and she gave me a dragon droplet, which I used to cure the rot. This allows for more dialogue options with the sculptor, and giving him the monkey boost from the Sunken Valley. He tells us some stories about the training he did with his old partner. Her name was Kingfisher, but she unfortunately got swallowed by the ape. This is indicated by the finger attachment we find inside the ape after defeating it, which belonged to her, as well as the sword that is stuck in the neck of the ape. Now back to the Fountainhead Palace. There is an easy mini boss on top of this hill that kicks lightning balls at us. And after defeating it, we can safely travel in the waters without being struck down by it, and use the Mibu breathing dive and avoiding the big fish near us and making it to the other side. Here we make it up a hill and we pray against a stone, and now we're teleported to the realm where the divine dragon is. But the divine dragon seems to be sick, indicated by these tree branches that we fight at the start. These are the sickness roots to the dragon, and we have to kill all of them to restore the dragon back to life. After killing all of them, the dragon blossoms up again and we get the coolest looking boss in the entire game. And I say coolest looking because this boss is nothing more than a gimmick boss. It is heavily scripted the way you fight it. At first you have to jump onto some tree branches and grab lightning and deflect it back at the dragon. If you do it enough times, the dragon pushes us back, and now we have to fight against some easily telegraphed attacks. And finally the tree branches appear again. We grapple onto them, grabbing the last lightning attack and deflecting it back at the dragon. And now we have to go and get the dragon tears. We walk on its blade and use the mortal blade to make the dragon cry and receive the tears. After this fight, we're immediately teleported back to Kuro's room at Ashina Castle. We find out that Ishin has died to his sickness, and Emma gives us the secret passage key because Kuro is once again kidnapped by Genichiro and we have to go get him. Going outside, we find the invasion has gone into full effect, and we notice that the sculptor is gone as well and Ashina Outskirts is in flames. Making your way to Ashina Outskirts, we meet another fat ass, but this time this fat ass has armor on it, and instead of poison, it breathes fire. Now you could use the spear to remove the armor off this guy, but like I mentioned, I did not have the spear, so I was forced to only hit it from the back and finish off the job. Here I decided that it was time to finally fight a headless. So I upgraded my prosthetic shield and got a prosthetic skill as well that allowed me to deflect the terror attacks and follow it up with a counter attack of my own. And it took me a while, but I finally managed to defeat him.
Fuck, you digging in me, you digging in me, you digging in a nigga.
Defeating him gives you an item called Spirit Fall, and it is similar to the sugar buffs, but you can use them multiple times with spirit emblems. But back on our side quest, which is trying to find the sculptor, we start going deeper into Ashina Outskirts, and we see that the starting part of the game has been completely destroyed by something that we can only imagine to be a flaming beast. Going back to the field where we fought Gyobu, we find the Demon of Hatred. This is what the sculptor became after the invasion started on Ashina. Now this boss is an odd boss, and in my opinion doesn't really fit very well in this game because you have to ignore the main mechanic that the game has been teaching you so far, which is deflecting, and use dodging more frequently, because most of his moves are done by his flaming arm. Every time you deflect it, you get dealt a ton of chip damage and slowly you get put on flames. But aside from the flaming moves, he has some stomp attacks, some head stomps where he stomps his head on the ground trying to hit you. He also has a jumping attack where when he lands he does an explosion. You can easily avoid this move by just running away and jumping, then you can grapple onto him. Or you can use the flaming shield like I did, which blocks all of the damage, and you can make an easy follow-up counter attack and deal a lot of damage. Getting to his second phase, he does a new unblockable fire move where you have to jump sideways to avoid it, and he also has this ritual type of dance attack where he summons a bunch of flaming skulls that chase you around. But the real show starts at the third phase. At the start, he tries to sweep underneath you with his flaming arm, and after 3 sweeps, he creates a giant ring of fire, so now you're stuck fighting him in this tight area. So he does a bunch of unblockable attacks and gains a new unblockable attack, which is a follow-up to his first unblockable, and he adds some follow-ups to his combos. But aside from those, he doesn't have anything else in the third phase, and even without having enough spirit emblems to use the shield, I did manage to defeat him. And now I went back to the main task at hand, which is saving Kuro. To do so, you have to go back to the secret passage at the start of the game. On our way, we find a very oddly placed general duo here. Now, duo fights do not belong in this game, because when two guys start fighting you, you're gonna get gangbanged like you're in an audition for the casting couch.
Who made that mess? You did, Kate.
But you can fight these guys one by one, and the way you do so is by using a skill and the upgraded whistle tree to lure them into a corner and then kill the regular general that doesn't have a second phase, so you can fairly fight the spear general. And now we get to the secret passage. Crossing it, you get to the final boss of the game. The final boss being, again, Genichiro. He tells us that he has found the second mortal blade that Ishin used 20 years ago against the rebellions, and he used it to stab Kuro, almost fatally wounding him. And now we have to face off against Genichiro for the last time. Genichiro is the same Genichiro you fight at his third phase in the second fight, but instead of the lightning moves now, he uses the mortal blade, which isn't that hard to deal with. You just have to run away from it, and the fight is not even difficult. You can beat Genichiro very easily, which shows how far the player has come from being stomped at the start of the game and now defeating Genichiro with almost zero effort. Genichiro gives up and finally loses all hope.
I was fucked up. I mean, I hit rock bottom, but I made no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable.
Genichiro binds his and Ishin's will together and brings back a very powerful version of Ishin. Sword Saint Ishin is the true final boss of the game, and he has everything you can think of. Quick combos, slow combos, and he also has a blink attack similar to the Ashina Elite, but it's very different because it has two variations. One when you stand far away, and one when you get close. He also has multiple thrust attacks and a devastating charge attack. But no, that's not everything he still has. His first phase is still packed with moves. He has an attack similar to the Divine Dragon, where he does a vertical wind attack that has another follow-up to it. In his second phase, he summons a spear out of thin air, and he combines the spear with his sword to do very long combos. Combos that extend to around 7 hits. But no, that's not the only weapon he has. Of course he has another weapon. He uses a semi-automatic pistol, which he has in the 16th century of Japan. Now, looking up close to the pistol, it looks like a pirate's pistol.
Listen, nigga, I don't know what kind of gun that is.
In this phase, he is more aggressive than his first phase. In the first phase, he kinda just allows you to walk around, but in this one he goes full bonkers mode and he doesn't even let you recover your posture or heal. But getting to his third phase, it's almost similar to the second one. He only gains this new double wind attack, and of course he has lightning attacks now that give you a very good reward if you deflect them mid-air. This phase, because of the lightning, it gets much easier, and we finally finish off Ishin, and he goes down on his knees accepting his fate. Going back to Kuro, we can make two choices, either to only give him the Dragon Tears or to give him the Dragon Tears with the Ever Blossom. If you only give the Dragon Tears, Wolf severs the ties of immortality, inserting the blade into Kuro and ending his life. This ending seems to indicate that the cycle repeats itself and eventually another wolf will come looking for more power to get stronger. It's not my favorite ending, but people say it is kinda the good ending of the game. But I did not go for this ending in this playthrough.
I told you no!
I gave Kuro the Everblossom. You get a different cutscene where Wolf cuts off his head and Kuro becomes a normal boy, no longer having ties to the dragon's blood at all. Personally, I like this ending more. This story is not about Wolf. Wolf as a character is very weak. He's just doing his job, protecting his master, and he isn't really vocal in this game.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man.
This game is about Ashina and Kuro and how the rest of the world is obsessed with the dragon's blood and immortality. Purifying the last true owner of the dragon's blood puts an end to that obsession. And also, I really like the owl fight, the second one especially, and it is too good to miss out on, so I went for this ending. Now we have to go back.
Yeah, it's rewind time.
Remember when you had to make that choice to either choose to break the code or obey the code? If you choose to obey the code, the game double checks if you want to make this choice, because this choice cuts the game's length almost in half. And for this video, I decided to do this ending for the first time.
Yes. I expected no less from you, my boy. It seems we have a troubling guest.
Now we're forced to fight Emma. Emma's fight is pretty good. For being a phase transition to the real final boss of this ending, she has a good amount of challenge to her. She isn't a pushover like Genichiro, but she is a lot more stronger and a lot more aggressive, and she is really fast. She has a very unique move that looks like this. Depending on if you perfectly parry this move or just block it, the final attack either gives you an advantage or gives her an advantage. And she has a really strong grab move that has crazy tracking to it. And the hitbox is really janky. Defeating Emma, Wolf does the most soulless death blow. Then Ishin comes and sees that we have killed the only person who hasn't done anything but help us in the entire game. He realizes we are becoming Shura and he must put an end to all of this. And we get to the final showdown of this ending. The entire arena gets set on flames, indicating that some demonic entity is coming. The first phase is mostly the same as the first phase as Sword Saint Ishin. He has all the same moves I mentioned earlier, but he has one neat trick under his sleeve. When he stands still like this, if you try to attack him, he does this cool dodge. He lets you know that you're not fighting some ordinary old man.
The nigga swung his body to the side, and that's how my shit was open, and he hit me. Boom, pow! You know what I'm saying?
The reason why Ishin fights a bit dirtier in this version, because Ishin is very old and he's almost on the verge of death and can no longer swing like he used to in his old days. So he has to make up for the lack of strength by relying on some different tactics. Getting to his second phase, he somehow controls the flames on the ground, making them erupt, and then follows up by one of the coolest moves in the game. Now his Ichimonji is always followed up with an unblockable flame attack that you have to avoid the first attack to avoid it. And he summons flames using his blade that you have to avoid again. But aside from all that, it is pretty much the same for his second phase. You can deal with it very easily if you know how to deal with those tricky moves. And if I had to make a choice on which version I prefer, I would definitely choose Sword Saint Ishin. There is no doubt in that. Because the fight is much longer and much harder to get used to. This fight is mainly a tricky boss fight that you just have to dodge out of the way of some moves instead of deflecting. Defeating Ishin, we get this ending cutscene.
That took a while. The whole country is ours for the taking. Hey, du kannst einfach nur sweetheart. Shura!
No! You're... You can't be Shura!
Fun fact about this ending, if you glitch the camera out, you can see that the head that Owl is holding is Genichiro's head. This ending shows that Wolf has completely lost his mind and the flames start to spread faster and Wolf becomes Shura, losing all emotion and becoming obsessed with killing and killing only. This is obviously the worst ending you can get in this game, but I only did it because of the boss fight. And the final ending that we still have to talk about, which many people consider to be the best ending of this game, it requires a long side quest that you have to complete. It has to do with Rice and the Divine Child and getting the hearts of the serpents all around the game, and it's a very long task. This ending is called the return ending, and it is the hardest one to get, and if you do all the right tasks, you get this ending cutscene instead.
Allow me to hold you in my heart. Let us depart to the west, to the birthplace of the divine dragon.
This ending is the closest ending that indicates towards another sequel for this game. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the main game. Of course, I did not cover everything about this game in this one video, but there are some other prosthetic tools that I did not mention because I'm not a fan of them and I do not know how to use them because I don't use them at all. Oh yeah, weapon arts. I forgot to talk about those. The only weapon art I talked about was the Immortal Blade weapon art, but again, I did not use them, so I'm not qualified to talk about them. And there are some more duplicate mini bosses I did not talk about in this game. But I did try to beat the Gauntlets of Strength, which are like a boss rush game modes that are added to the game as a DLC. These include slightly altered versions of Genichiro, Ishin, and Owlfather, but I didn't enjoy them much because you have to go through so many bosses to go to those different versions of these bosses, and by the time you get to them, you have forgotten how to deal with the moves that you were supposed to deal with, so I didn't bother much with them. The only rewards they give are memories and different costumes that are just cosmetics. So yeah, that's it for Sekiro. This game is one of my all-time favorite games when it comes to combat and gameplay and bosses. This video took me well over a month to make, so I'd appreciate a like on the video if you enjoyed. And let me know in the comments if there are any games you want me to make videos on. And on that note, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next video.